Hey, welcome to my channel. My name is Jessie, and today I'm going over my stats for all the books I read in 2021. This video might be a little bit more boring if you're more interested in, the actual books and the titles and the authors and what the books are about. This video is pretty much just numbers. I'll be going over how many books I read, what format I read them in, my highest rated book, my lowest rated book, the biggest book, the smallest book. There will be like a few titles and authors, but for the main part, this is mostly number focused. Before we start going through all the statistics of the books I read in 2021, I wanted to take a minute to remind you to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you are interested in finding more of my content a little more easily. So I used a combination of Storygraph and Goodreads to track all my information. And somewhere along the way, I ended up with a slight discrepancy. On Storygraph, there were a few times where I didn't upgrade Storygraph regularly. I just trying to stay in the habit of updating two apps on top of, I was just introducing Storygraph to myself, I guess, for the first time this year. On the other hand, Goodreads says I have read 108 books this year, so I'm going to assume that Goodreads is the more accurate number just because I was more consistent with keeping Goodreads updated. I updated Goodreads every time I finished a book. I tried to update it daily with like my percentage or pages read, but I didn't always do that. I have gone through Goodreads and Storygraph both several times to figure out what book I'm missing, and I don't know what book it is, and I don't know how I just keep managing to overlook the same thing, but it's just the way it is this time. Of those 108 books I read, 51 were physical books, 20 were audiobooks, and 37 were ebooks. I may have gotten some of my ebooks and audiobooks mixed up, but I'm pretty sure I'm pretty close to accurate. On average, I read 9 books a month, and the month where I read the most amount of books was July, where I read 12 books, and December was the lowest reading month for me, where I only read 5 books. On average, the books I read were about 360 pages, which sounds about right because I tend to pick up books that are typically around 350 to 400 pages. So I feel like that was a pretty good number and a pretty good representation of what I read. My average rating on Goodreads was 4 stars even, but my average rating on Storygraph was 3.91 stars. I think the Storygraph rating might be a little bit more accurate, excluding the book I'm missing, just because on Storygraph you can give quarter star and half star ratings, and I think that kind of helped with the accuracy. Because there were some books, 4 stars was just too high, but 3 stars was just too low, and 3.5 was right where it needed to be. But I couldn't input 3.5 into Goodreads, but I could in Storygraph. So I do think that the Storygraph rating is a little bit more accurate and representative of my reading overall. I also discovered this year that I'm definitely much more into new releases and newer books. 40 of the books I read were published in 2021, and 24 were published in 2020. I also read 22 2019 releases and 22 books that were released in 2018 or earlier. And some of those books I believe go as far back as 2005 or 2006. But for the most part, I'm definitely interested in newer books. The biggest book I read in 2021 was The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon at 848 pages. And the smallest book I read in 2021 was Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke by Eric LaRocca at 102 pages. According to Goodreads, the most popular book I read was The Fault in Our Stars by John Green, which was a reread. And the least popular book I read in 2021 was Foretold by Violet Lumani. I also really like how Storygraph keeps up with the top genres I read, the moods of the books I read, and also the pace of the books I read. So I'll make sure that I try to put all of that right here, screenshot of all of that from the app so you can see what that looks like for me. But I did write down my top 5 genres. And my top 5 genres were romance, YA, fantasy, LGBTQIA+ books, and thrillers. According to Storygraph, those were the top genres that I read in 2021. Anyways, though, I think this is a pretty quick and short video. Like I said, this is really just a quick rundown of the stats I read in 2021. I think in the beginning of 2021, I did a better job at trying to keep up with like the race of the author that I read, the gender of the author I read, and more information like that. And so I may try to do that again quarterly this year, but I'm not quite sure yet, just because I feel like that's a lot to keep up with. But at the same time, it would also, at the end of the year, make a breakdown of all my statistics more interesting, and I'd have more to tell you about. Anyways, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.